Hi-da-ho, hi-da-ho, hi-da-ho. So how are you all doing? I'm doing pretty good today. I went out, I did a nice little 7-mile run. I'm here in Towson, Maryland right now, because that's how my life goes. One minute I'm in South Beach, my wife and I are talking about what condo to rent in South Beach, and then somehow I wind up in Towson, Maryland for God knows how long. Ugh. Anyways, I went on a nice run today. Did a nice 7-mile run down Rogers Forge area. I have to say, if you're going to have to stay in the Baltimore area for any reason, Home's Too Sweet in Towson is very nice. And if you want a good run, you run south through Towson University. You get down to what's called the Rogers Forge neighborhood. You can just zigzag through that. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's old. It's old row houses, like 100-plus-year-old row houses, old trees, people walking dogs, kids running around in lawns. It shows you what Baltimore City used to be like. You understand why Baltimore City used to be a jewel in the crown of this country. Anyways, Rogers Forge still exists. Just be careful how many blocks further south you go. Oh, anyways, sad but true. You know, I come back here to the Baltimore area. You're talking to people. I like the people in the Baltimore area, right? There's that business vibe in the Baltimore area. And you're like, wow, this actually isn't too bad. And then you remember the murder rate. And then you remember that there's this one girl who's literally suing one of the high schools here because she graduated high school and she's still illiterate. She literally, the reason that she's suing, she's like, how is somebody able to graduate high school and still be illiterate? I don't know. That's a question that you have to ask when you're in Baltimore. I was talking to my buddy about that with Baltimore City. I was like, yeah, that's the problem with Baltimore. Like, people come here and they're like so hopeful. It's like they see the possibilities. And then 10 years later, they run away for their lives. It happens with every generation. Every generation comes, sees the possibilities. And then about 10 years later, they're running for the hills as the next generation comes in, and the next generation comes in, and the next generation comes in. Everybody can see the possibilities. They just can't turn those possibilities into reality. Anyways, again, can't fight the macro. Can't fight the macro forces. Anywho, as you may or may not know, may not. Anyways, I just ran 7 miles. Give me a break. As you may or may not know, I'm known as Eli, the computer guy. My pride and joy is something called SiliconDojo.com. There's free classes there, self-study classes. We have Introduction to Programming, Introduction to Python, SQL, Structured Query Language, and something called the Bottle Web App Framework. There are going to be more classes on there. We're going to have a series on AI and a whole bunch of other things. You know, as soon as my life gets slightly normal, I do one-on-one conversations with my students every Monday between 1 to 5. We do anywhere between 4 to 6 of those per week. And then we do group sessions. We've been having guests come on. So we've had a CEO of a managed service provider up in the Yukon. We've had a business development person. We had the founder of a development company. We've had those people. And we do that every week or so. Again, we're going to have somebody this week, but I don't know. Everything kind of went sideways to me. But anyways, those are the things we do at SiliconDojo.com. Again, the idea with Silicon Dojo, what if high-quality technology education was simply as accessible as water? That is the question. Anyways, what I want to talk about today is Klarna. Klarna getting rid of 40% of their staff because they're now using AI, they're now using artificial intelligence. And I think that this is interesting because it shows you how efficiency works in the technology world. And I think basically efficiency and improved workflows basically are coming for technology professionals yet again, as it did about 15 years ago. One of the things that I find fascinating nowadays with this whole generation of technology professionals that are so focused on like the JavaScript stack, again, React and Node and all of that kind of stuff, is there's this idea for some reason that like JavaScript is inherently valuable, right? There's doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs and JavaScript developers, right? These are the people that should be successful in the world, and everybody else should essentially starve to death. Anyway, so one of the things I talk about with technology, having been in the technology world for about 30 years at this point, 29, can you believe it's almost 30 years, is basically skill sets, the value of skill sets come and go. Again, when I graduated high school, you could go to the community college, you could learn to be a VCR repair person, and you could make 6 figures repairing VCRs. And that's $100,000 in the 1990s. So that's like 200 grand or something today, right? Simply by repairing VCRs. Well, obviously, VCRs went to the wayside, and so people then were assembling computers and repairing computers, and that went by the wayside, and there was servers and surveillance systems and all that kind of stuff, and that went by the wayside. And then again, it's like JavaScript stack and developing and all that kind of thing. And one of my arguments is basically with this modern world of AI, that essentially AI is pushing over dominoes that should have been pushed over a long time ago, that because of 1% interest rates, because of really bad management and leadership in the tech world, that there has basically just been tech employee bloat, that there are a lot of people that have been hired for positions not actually to do the work. They've been hired to put an ass in a seat, not to actually bring ROI to the company. One of the things I've argued for a long time is that this is going to bite the tech world in the ass. Again, one of the things I've argued for a while now is the whole idea that we had enough technology professionals probably in about 2017. We hit about the limit of how many tech professionals we needed about 2017, and everything past that has basically been fat. Basically, you have these tech companies, they need to prove that they're successful. If you do not have profit, and you do not have revenue, and you do not have growth, how do you prove you're successful? You hire more people. So literally you hire more employees to prove to the investors that you're successful, so you can get more money out of the investors. So then you hire more employees to get more money out of the investors, so you hire more employees to get more money out of the investors. And at some point, that house of cards is going to come down. And again, the interesting thing for me, being in the tech world for about 3 decades at this point, is, again, this is nothing new. I would argue this isn't even that interesting at this point. This is kind of one of those things you should be able to say in about 2 sentences and walk away, and that there shouldn't even be an argument. But again, in the modern world, you say these kinds of things and then people start crying and then it goes poorly, right? But I think about this like with the old school A+, right? So the A+, the MCSE, the CCNA, those types of skill sets. And one of the things I've talked about for a year, and again, it has been years at this point. I think it was 2012. I do believe it was 2012. I was at Interop, New York. So there used to be a conference called Interop. It was a vendor agnostic IT conference, and it was amazing. I don't even think it exists anymore. Anyways, there were multiple ones too. They had an Interop in Las Vegas, which was very nice, and they had Interop in New York for a number of years. Anyway, so I went to the Interop in New York, and I do think it was about 2012, and I've talked about this many times. And one of the things there, again, they had a CIO come in, and they were talking about their automation? Yeah, their automation routines. So automation routines, orchestration routines, all of this new technology that was coming down the pike at that time. Puppet, orchestration, Chef, virtualization, really hammering on virtualization and failover and that type of thing. And the interesting thing was, again, this was 2012, and basically the CIO talked about how they had been able to double the employee headcount at their company at the exact same time. Wait for it. They decreased their IT staff by a quarter, by 25%. Because basically, again, however you may feel about Windows 10 and the rest of it, or I guess it might have been Windows 8 at that point, basically Windows 8 was a piece of garbage, but it was a relatively stable piece of garbage, right? You may hate it, but there wasn't a lot to fix about it, right? Anyways, networking was pretty solid at this point. Windows 8, however you feel about it, again, was pretty solid at this point. Active Directory was pretty solid at this point. Again, you get these orchestration tools, Puppet, Chef, that type of thing, patch management tools. Again, patch management, that was a big sexy thing at the time. And basically with all of these tools, the fact of the matter is IT staff could support more and more and more people with fewer and fewer resources. Again, it was interesting. I went to a tech company about the same time period, and they had 500 employees. So they had 500 employees, and I was being shown around the tech company, and then I went into their help desk. So they had their help desk area, and they had 2 employees. They had 2 employees at the help desk, and I was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. Okay, so this is the help desk. Where are your desktop support employees? They're like, what? No, we do that too. Their help desk was help desk, desktop support, server support, 500 full-time employees, and they had 2 technical staff, right? And again, you have to realize, when I started in IT proper, we still had Windows 95 in the enterprise back in 2000. You look at that thing wrong, it blue screens of death on you. And so the thought that you could have 2 staff, that's it, for 500 employees, like, right? But that's the thing, is with efficiency, with new products, with automation, with all of this stuff, these employees were able to support more and more folks with less and less resources. And so one of the things that I've argued for a while now, basically in the coding world, is essentially that efficiency more or less has to come to the coding environment, right? One, so many employees have been hired, not because they've been needed, but because of 1% interest rates. And then beyond that, it's just that there's a lot of fat in these systems. Again, like I get a lot of crap for myself. I'm snarky. I'm an mean old geek who screams at clouds. People are like, Eli, that's not appropriate for technology professionals in the 2020s. And the funny part is, again, I think about this as a technology professional, is if you are working on systems that are important, you're working on systems that are important, and if you make a mistake, it is going to cause people real and actual harm, right? And you probably don't have enough resources anyway, right? You're never given enough resources. The reality is you become snarky and cranky and jaded pretty quickly, right? I've got work to do. I've got to focus on what I'm doing. If I fuck up, a lot of people are going to be in pain. So, and again, that's one of the interesting things. You talk with so many of the young technology professionals nowadays, and they're just so happy. They're so happy, and life is good, right? Eli, you need to relax and go to the cappuccino bar. Eli, go eat a quinoa salad. What the fuck are you talking about, quinoa salad? What does quinoa have to do with being a geek? Anyways, nap pods? Nap pods? What's that? I've got a chair, I've got a table. That's my nap pod. Anyways, right? But that's one of the things you notice, is so many of these folks are so happy. And the reality is because they don't have a lot of stress on them. There isn't that feeling that if they fuck up, everything is going to go to hell. Everything will be happy and smiling. And then the worst part is you get so many of these people that they assume that's what the tech world is actually like. And again, I just start looking at that, and it's like, wow, you have a lot of happy employees. That means there's a lot of fat. There's a lot of fat to chop off. And I think that's one of the things is with AI, is that I think AI basically gives a lot of the leaders of technology companies essentially an excuse to start firing people and to start looking for efficiencies. Again, it's interesting in the technology world and the greater society world, where there are things that are known that people don't do until there's some kind of like triggering event. I think about this with QR codes in the United States, right? So QR codes, everybody knows what a QR code is now. But the reality is, up until 2020 in the US and COVID hit, more or less people didn't use QR codes. Again, QR codes are stable. They've been around for God knows how long. Again, the first time I saw them was like 2010. All phones support them, the whole 9 yards. QR codes were there. But the reality is almost nobody used a QR code. They're just like, okay, there's a QR code, yeah, whatever. The interesting thing is COVID comes along, we then come to go to like touchless menus and all that kind of horse crap, and all of a sudden people start using QR codes, and now it's 4.5, 5 years later, and QR codes are absolutely normal, right? QR codes were stable and reliable and usable 5 years ago, but nobody used them until COVID happened, and now everybody uses QR codes. Again, it's interesting. It's like one of the tipping points, and it forces people to start doing things. And I think one of the interesting things to be thinking about with the leadership world and the management world in the tech environment is, again, for some reason, for a decade and a half at this point, they've been doing piss poor jobs. They believe as tech leaders that their responsibility is essentially everything other than ROI. Right? It's not about their return on investment. It's not about what value employees are bringing to the company. It's all about net pods and video games and making sure everybody's happy. I think the interesting thing that happens is AI comes along, and basically AI forces a rethink societally on what people's responsibility actually is, what these managers and leaders should actually be doing. And I think with this refocus to AI, basically it reprioritizes things like efficiency. And so the issue to keep in mind then is it's not so much that AI endangers your job. It's more that AI changes the path of inertia. So now more managers and more leaders are looking at how to optimize their staff, get more efficiency, get more productivity out of their staff. Sometimes that'll come about because of AI, and sometimes it'll come about simply because you can probably fire a quarter of your staff and nobody's even going to notice. All right. And the other thing to be thinking about this with AI is that AI gives managers the cover for firing people. Right? So if a manager comes out, right, if the founder of a startup comes out and they just fire a quarter of their staff, they fire a quarter of their staff, but they say, don't worry, you will not see any decrease in the quality of our product. Right? Well, that brings up a lot of questions, especially for like the investors. So the investors are sitting there and they're like, well, wait a minute, we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars into your company. You just laid off a quarter of your staff for no real reason, efficiency or whatever. So basically, does that mean that you as a CEO, you as a founder, have not been doing your job to manage your employees properly? And that's one of the big tasks with being a founder, with being a CEO, is making sure that employees are managed properly. And so that is a bad story for a lot of these founders, right? If you're able to eliminate a quarter of your staff and you do not see any decrease in service because of that, that means you have not been doing your job for multiple years, which brings up a lot of question marks about if you are the appropriate person to keep this particular company going forward. The interesting thing is if you bring up AI, see, what you can say is, well, AI, like with LLMs, right, that really, came to the forefront 2 years ago, and it wasn't really good enough for us until 6 months ago. Right? So think about this. Think about this with a story, right? As a manager or as a boss. They could either eliminate a quarter of their staff and see no decrease in quality, and then there's a whole bunch of questions about what the fuck they've been doing for the past 5 years as they've been gobbling down investor money, right? That's not a good story to have, right? A much better story is, look at this new AI technology. We are going to utilize cutting edge technology to massively increase the efficiency at our company, which allows us to eliminate 25% of our workforce. One of these stories makes the founder look like a knob. The other story makes the founder look like they're at the forefront of their industry. At the end of the day, a quarter of the employees are still going to go the hell away, and there's not going to be any really decrease in quality of the product that's going out. But I think that's one of the things to be looking at, like with this hyper focus on AI. If you think of it more as a convenience story, again, just like when you go into an interview, you have to tell a story about yourself. What is the story about you that you're trying to present to the HR person so that you get hired? The same is true with founders to their investors investors. They're trying to tell a story, and this whole AI story is a good one. And it's one everybody is going with, right? Whether it's Mark Zuckerberg or Nadala, or we're going to be talking about Klarna in a second, they're all going with this whole AI. Let's all pretend that AI is a reason we can eliminate all these employees. So it looks like we're at the cutting edge. Why I do bring that up, though, is from one point of view, it doesn't really matter. Employees are being laid off. Microsoft is laying off another 3% of their employees. Another 6,000 employees are going from Microsoft. Again, Klarna is getting rid of employees, the whole 9 yards. So at one point, it doesn't really matter. Employees getting eliminated is just employees getting eliminated. But it's another bigger thing to be thinking about too, with this whole idea. Like when you hear so much about AI, right? AI. But think about that, and this is where the issue with our industry is what happens when everybody lies. What happens when everybody lies? Not just the politicians lie, not just the CEOs lie, but your parents lie. Everybody lies, right? There's this mass delusion about AI because AI makes everybody feel better, right? If you get fired because of AI, that is a better story than if you got fired because you were lazy as shit. Yeah, I was making $150,000 a year for the past 5 years, basically doing nothing, right? Like if you go and you tell your parents and you tell your friends that you were making 6 figures for the past 5 years and they ask you, what were you doing to make that amount of money? And you can't really say. You can't really define what projects that you were able to complete. You can't really define what value you brought to the company. You can't really define why you worked at the company, really. Again, that's a hard story. Like nobody's gonna feel bad for you. Right? If you're making over $100,000 a year for 5 years, and basically your job is a joke, and then you get laid off, nobody is going to shed a tear for you. You should be happy somebody was stupid enough to write you a check for 5 years, right? On the other hand, if you were making 6 figures for 5 years at one of these big tech companies, and then you got eliminated because of AI, right? Oh, everybody, that's a problem with AI nowadays. Look, a good employee, like look at you. You were working for that company for 5 years. We know how valuable you were because you were making such good money. And now they just come in with artificial intelligence and they just get rid of somebody like you. That is why AI is dangerous. Right? And so the CEOs are lying about AI to make themselves seem more impressive. The employees getting laid off are lying about AI to make themselves seem more impressive. NVIDIA is lying about AI because, they're worth $3 trillion now. I get what that's going on, right? Trump's lying about AI. Z's lying about AI. Everybody's lying about AI because AI, there's just something about AI. It's like the juicy story. It's the juicy story. Everybody can get behind that dumbass story. But where you have to be careful about, it is a dumbass story. It is a dumbass story. So when you're thinking about what your future is, do be careful if you hyper-focus too much on AI, because at some point the story is going to unravel. Anyways, so I want to talk about this today. Klarna CEO says AI helped company shrink workforce by 40%. 40%. They went from like 5,000 employees to 3,000 employees. And one of the reasons is because they've been using quote unquote artificial intelligence in order to do that. And again, think about this, even with these really large companies. How many of these companies could eliminate 40% of their staff and they probably wouldn't even notice? Klarna CEO Sebastian whatever, said the company has managed to shrink its headcount by about 40% in part due to investments in artificial intelligence and natural attrition in its workforce. Quote, the truth is the company has shrunk from about 5,000 to now almost 3,000 employees. If you go to LinkedIn and look at the jobs, you'll see how we're shrinking. And so think about this too. And again, think about this like with the stories that people try to tell and what they're proud about, right? Not that long ago, CEOs, the way that they impressed people was by growing. Look at how fast we're growing. Now a point of pride by these CEOs is how fast they're shrinking. The Swedish fintech provider has been outspoken about its aggressive adoption of AI tools across the company while touting the productivity gains that have come along as a result. The company deployed an AI-generated version of the CEO to announce its third quarter results last year to demonstrate that AI could automate many jobs. Klarna partnered with ChatGPT maker OpenAI in 2023 and launched an AI customer service assistant using its technology a year later. The company said last year that AI was doing the work of 700 customer service agents. That's a hell of a thing. Klarna's headcount fell from 5,527 full-time employees as of the end of December 2022 to 3,422 staff last December, according to the company's IPO prospectus. The company attributed the reduction to its effort to leverage AI and lower its overall headcount, adding that it expects headcount to continue to fall over time. Let's see here. We have simply communicated to our employees that we're going to do, what we're going to do is we're going to shrink, so we're going to stop hiring, the CEO said. Natural attrition in a company like ours is 15 to 20% per year, so we shrink naturally 15 to 20% by people just leaving. So, yeah. Klarna. So they do like the buy now, pay later, that type of thing. So they've been able to eliminate 40% of their staff with AI and other efficiency. So this is something that you need to be thinking about with your jobs going forward, and thinking about what the macro world looks like. Again, the whole argument that I make is you can't fight the macro. Listen to these CEOs. One of the things I talked about a few years ago with COVID, right? All of these companies were hiring. Microsoft was hiring. Facebook was hiring. All these companies were hiring as many employees as they possibly could. And as I argued then, it didn't make any sense, right? Tech employees, the services we provide grow exponentially. It's not linearly, right? So if you have a hamburger place and you're making hamburgers, one employee can, let's say, make 50 hamburgers an hour. So if you sell 50 hamburgers an hour, you need one cook. If you sell 100 hamburgers an hour, you need two cooks. If you sell 150 hamburgers an hour, you need three cooks, right? That's scaling linearly. In the tech world, we scale what's called exponentially. If you have one server, you need one server administrator. If you have 100 servers, you need two server administrators. If you have 1,000 servers, you need three server administrators. And if you have 10,000 servers, you need four server administrators, right? Basically, you do need somebody there, but that one person can support more and more and more systems. And so when you looked at Facebook and you looked at a lot of these tech companies during the COVID boom, and they're hiring tens of thousands of employees, that did not make a damn bit of sense. It didn't make a sense from the technical world. It didn't make sense from the business world. The only reason it made sense is because all of these people, right, they were in lockstep mentally with each other. If Google's growing, Facebook has to grow. If Facebook is growing, Twitter has to grow. If Twitter is growing, right, all these other companies have to grow, right? As soon as Elon Musk starts firing people, it's weird, right? Elon Musk fires a lot of employees at Twitter, and then Mark Zuckerberg fires a lot of employees, and then Google fires a lot of employees, right? Right? It has nothing to do with reality. It has to do with their senile mindset that they have. And again, like what we've seen over the past 10 or 15 years of these tech companies is been about grow. Look at how many employees Amazon is hiring. Look at how many employees Google is hiring. Look at how many employees Microsoft or whatever is hiring, right? That's how you can tell a company's successful. What's interesting now is we're seeing this dramatic shift, right? Intel is proud to lay off 21,000 employees. Microsoft is laying off another 3% of their workforce. Google is laying off people. Facebook is laying off people, right? Again, Klarna, all these companies, right? We are proud to shrink. And so what happens in a job market? What happens for you as a potential employee when companies, when CEOs are proud to be shrinking their headcounts, not growing? Basically, this is where I would argue for you folks out there, you need to get more credentials. Again, the idea of you could just go to a boot camp, learn React or whatever, and that's going to get you a good job, those days are falling away. Again, my argument is be a full stack developer. Get more skills. Don't rest on your laurels. Be posting to GitHub regularly. Go schmooze. The reality is that it's going to become harder and harder and harder to get a job. Therefore, you have to work harder to get a job. Is that fair? That's not for me to say. Do not get to morals or ethics in these videos. Remember, slavery was moral up until it wasn't in the Christian world. That's its own deal, right? I don't get into that. I'm just trying to explain to you folks how this world actually works and what the macro environment currently looks like. And that's where I would say with this, again, you hear this hyper focus on things like artificial intelligence. And I would argue artificial intelligence is probably only a sliver of what is actually going on. That is a sliver that gives cover to the CEOs that allows them to currently do what they're doing. So anyways, there you go. There's some thoughts for you. Klarna has gotten rid of 40% of their headcount. Again, like I said, Microsoft is getting rid of 3% of their headcount right now. All these companies are getting rid of employees, and they're saying they're doing it because of AI. So what do you think? What do you think? Are you out there trying to get a job right now? Are you going to go off and get a job doing something else? Again, it's an interesting, like whenever there's these bubbles in the tech field, there's people that ride the bubble and then the bubble pops and then they go off and do other things. I had a mechanic once. My car was getting fixed. And the guy had been an MC, he had been an MCSE, had done really well in the tech world. And then when the dot-com bubble popped, he went off and became an auto mechanic. Again, that's the reality. He had a mortgage. He had a mortgage he had to pay. He would have preferred to set up servers, but, you know, at the end of the day, changing oil still paid him money too. So that's what he ended up doing. So what do you think about this? Do you think AI is as significant as they're claiming it is? Or do you think AI is just a smoke screen so that managers can, you know, now basically try to eliminate staff? I don't know. Put your thoughts down below. And with that, see y'all later.